What is going on, folks? It is Steiner here with an extraordinarily special episode of Secondhand Talent. We have with us troubadour Steve Poltz and photographer and so much more, Jay Blakesberg. It's a quick intro, folks, because we're going to get right into it. Thank you to Homegrown Art for the desk piece. Thank you to the Grateful Dead for the music. And thank you, as always, to my tiny co-host, Tiny Steiner. And you can catch, if you're in Chicago, Jay and Steve over at Garcia's Wednesday, July 15th. I'll be there. You should be too. Jay, Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I love the synchronicity there. It makes sense that you're doing shows together when you're responding at the same time. I love that right off the bat. Now, I have a quick question for each of you to respond to before we get this interview started. I ask this question at the top of every interview. The first time you heard the name Secondhand Talent, what was the image conjured up in your mind?
I thought that Steve was the first-hand talent and I was the second hand. It's sort of like first string baseball, second string. I'm like minor leagues, he's major leagues. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, is that I'm like, I'm in second position here. But I'm fighting hard for first position. I'm going to make it to major leagues.
How about you, Steve?
I pictured sitting at a counter at Waffle House wanting my waffle extra crispy, and they said, "Oh, our cook called in sick, so we got the secondhand talent cook in." And it's this dude that's just stoned out back that normally washes the dishes. And so I'm somewhere in Alabama at a Waffle House, and the secondhand talent's making my waffle.
You get waiting for some raw potatoes on a plate, basically.
Yeah.
Well, it's really incredible to have you both on the show. And before we dive deep into what this episode's all about, I was hoping to hear just a little bit for our audience, a little bit about you. I know, Jay, most folks know you just as a photographer, and Steve, most folks know you as just a on-stage performer, but you guys have so many more things that you're involved in. And I'd love to hear a little bit from each of you about some of the other values that you do.
You first.
All right.
Steve.
Well, I would say it's crazy because I've always gotten into playing music. I've always loved being a troubadour. I was in a band for years called the Rugburns. We would always play at Shuba's in Chicago. And so I always had these tight Chicago connections. And then I became this solo troubadour, and I would go out and play all these different shows. And I met Jay Blakesberg through a band of sisters. They're twins. They're called Shook Twins. And they were really besties with Jay, and Jay had shot them many times. And I did a show with them, and that was where I met Jay Blakesberg. And I'd always knew of his work and his books and all his photo exhibits. But more than that, he's such a raconteur, and he's so good on stage. Like, a lot of times camera people aren't as comfortable being, on the other side of the camera. But Jay is just at home both ways, and he can tell stories, he can spin yarns. And so when I met him, I felt like I'd always known him. It was one of those things, like it was a friendship that had always existed. And right away, I became good friends with him. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and for me, kind of the same thing. I knew of Poltz mostly from my friend Dave Margulies, who runs the High Sierra Music Festival. And he had been talking about Poltz forever, and I was aware of a couple of things. I sort of knew about the Bag of Porn a little bit. After I saw my first Steve Poltz show, which was that one with the Shook Twins at the Freight and Salvage in Berkeley, I was just like, holy fuck, how did I not know about this guy sooner? We all heard the rumors that he wrote songs for Jewel and was like a hit songwriter in San Diego. and people would always say, if you go see Poltz, there's a good chance that you might end up laughing, crying, and peeing in your pants from laughing so hard, all in the same song. And that came true numerous times for me over the years, seeing Poltz perform. Most notably, it was a High Sierra show. There was a man named Levi, who was battling cancer, and Poltz, proudly does a fuck cancer chant in a song, and we were laughing and crying all in the same song, and that's a powerful thing when a performer can do that. And so, the other thing that blew me away about Poltz, was he was the first acoustic troubadour that I ever saw stage dive and crowd surf across a festival crowd. And when I photographed that moment, that's what I'm looking for when I'm photographing bands. I'm looking for like really exciting, fun things, when you got an acoustic singer songwriter standing in a microphone, strumming and singing into a song, you get photographs, but they're not very dynamic. And all of a sudden, Poltz is out there literally crowd surfing over 1,000 people at High Sierra on the what was the Meadow stage. And I was like, this dude is my best friend. And so that's how Poltz and I connected. But I think your question was something different. I think you were like, what do you guys do besides what everybody thinks you do?
Well, I was just about to say, don't limit it to just that. Let's hear more about. I mean, now the bag of porn aside, like we'll get. I don't know if we'll have time to circle back to that, but
oh yeah, you gotta learn about the bag of porn. I mean, it's literally the most next level thing ever. And I'm not talking about the bag of porn that's under my bed. I'm talking about the bag of porn that was under his bed when he was a teenager. And so, but anyway, going back, I did an interview with a woman the other day for a blog. I think it's called Jam Fan Live, and one of the questions that she asked me, the last question that she asked me was, "What are you most excited about?" And I just reread the interview and was just sort of editing to make sure that I sounded intelligent and it was factually correct. And I was like, holy fuck, this is all the shit that I have going on in my life right now. This is a lot. Besides getting ready to shoot High Sierra, besides getting ready to perform with Steve Poltz at Garcia's in Chicago. And little secret here, we're going to actually test it out at High Sierra at a play shop on Sunday afternoon this year. It's not announced yet, but we're gonna just do a little test run of this thing that we've never done before. And anyway, the list was, I've got a museum exhibit at the Grammy Museum in LA. I'm working on a giant Grateful Dead exhibit that's going to be in San Francisco this summer. I'm doing a book about a famous model that worked with Richard Avedon in the 40s and the 50s. I'm coming out with a new zine on the 30th anniversary of the Tibet Freedom Concert. I'm still out there promoting my Dead and Company book. The list, all of a sudden I listed like, a dozen things. I'm shooting the Hudson River Music Festival. I'm shooting High Sierra. I'm shooting some Steve Poltz stuff and Margot Price and Jesse Wells and Graham Lesh and the Terrapin Road Show. I'm like, oh my God, this is what I've got going on in my life. I really got a lot of stuff happening. So anyway, that's what's going on in my world besides just being out there hanging out with Steve Poltz, doing Workingman's Dead, song, stories, and improvisation with Jay Blakesberg and Steve Poltz. We had an arm wrestle over whose name went first. He wanted my name, I wanted his name, and he fucking crushed me in an arm wrestling competition, so my name had to go first.
Oh man. That's fairly epic. I just want to just put out there a little bit about what I love about each of you. Jay, your versatility as an artist in so many oeuvres, forget about bands. Most people I think know you for your work with the Dead and Company. But you've worked with so many phenomenal bands, from the Flaming Lips to the Chili Peppers to Tom Waits to Santana. And one of the other things that I really admire about you, I actually have your book from Fare Thee Well. It was a really important weekend for me. And, kind of like how you were saying, seeing Steve crowd surf was the things that you look for. I recall from that weekend, my compass, for lack of a better term, for the weekend was Bill Walton, rest in peace. And wherever I was sitting, it was in relation to where he was standing, because I could always see him from wherever he was on the, so, you know, the perfect person to have in a crowd.
He was the North Star at shows, you know,
Always.
and also a fellow San Diegoan as is Steve Poltz. So, he was ubiquitous down in San Diego at dead cover bands, and played with one called the Electric Waste Band. And Bill Walton was unlike anybody you've ever met. Also, truly a one of a kind individual. You know, my favorite part about Bill Walton is that he spoke in Grateful Dead lyrics. You know, so when I saw Bill, he'd be like, "Jay, you are the eyes of the world." You get confused. Listen to the music, because they love each other. Like, literally, he spoke in full sentences in Grateful Dead lyrics. It was truly a phenomenon, and just the most lovely human being ever, with kindness just flowing out of him at all times.
And I think that translates back to your book about Fare Thee Well, because the arrangement of that book is beautiful. I'm a big fan of art books, photo books in general, but that's one that I've gone through so many times I can't even count, and it's something that I admire greatly. And Steve, you know, Love a Little Bigger, that song, you know, I was just listening to my brother Asa earlier, and that song came on shuffle for me, and I thought that it's like, wow, I wrote the lyric. Hold on. Jacob took a hammer and he went up a hill, built a nice house for his best friend Bill. And I'm like, it's almost a counterpart to my brother Asa there in its lyricism, and like the way that it's just beautifully spoken and written. And for the record, whatever the comments say, I prefer your petrichor to fishes. And then what I admire about both of you is simply the desire to experiment. So tell us about the impetus behind the idea to do this project, Workingman's Dead. What's it all about?
What's it all about, Alfie? Well, I was with Jay at this, I think, were we at Golden Road?
Golden Road, yeah.
Yeah, we were at Golden Road, and Jay was doing his slide presentation, which is really phenomenal. Like, it's so good, and I've seen it multiple times. And what's cool about it is Jay is good at improvising, so you know, no two shows are alike. So he's up there. He might have the slides in the order he picks that day and what have you. But his ramblings, when looking at the pictures, what it does is it spurs memories stored in his brain. And then he starts riffing on that. So he comes up to me and says, prior to him doing this, because he knows I love challenge and I love spontaneity, is what I live for. I live for danger and spontaneity. He says, "Hey, did you ever see the movie Something About Mary?" And I was like, "Yeah, I love that movie." He goes, "Remember how Jonathan Richman pops up and he's got an acoustic guitar and he sings about what you're watching?" I go, yeah, I love that." He goes, "It'd be cool if when I do this slideshow, you come in and I just like rub my nose when I'm done talking and you write a song on the spot about what I was just saying." And this is right up my wheelhouse, right in my wheelhouse to do something like that. And I said, "Are you kidding? I'd love to do that with an audience there, no net, and you can just die on stage, and you just have to have faith that a song's going to come out of you, and you are going to be like human Chat GPT and tell the audience what they just saw and put it in the form of a song." And so we did it. And it was amazing. So then we did it again in Park City, Utah at the Park City Song Summit. And so we decided it was too cool to not do it again. And then we would always end the show and we would be in a circle and we'd sing Ripple or something, you know, maybe Broke Down Palace. And then Jay was like, "Learn these other songs." So right now I'm learning these other songs. I'm kind of in Grateful Dead boot camp so we can, you know, call on some other songs and do some Workingman's Dead songs, and also in conjunction with the slideshow going on and Jay's rambling stories. have musical breaks. And I think it's going to be a communion unlike no other. And it's going to really be, the real big one's going to be at Garcia's. I think it's July 15th, and Garcia's is in Chicago. And I'm so excited for this gig. It's going to sell out. So get your tickets early. And it's going to be a really cool show. So that's how it kind of came together.
To continue on that, yeah. So we do this thing at the Golden Road. He's making up these songs on the spot. He has no idea what I'm going to talk about, and it's just the most mind-boggling thing ever. The songs are brilliant. Everybody is just literally dying of laughter and smiling from ear to ear, and it's so spot on. So we pitch it to our friend Ben Anderson, who does the Park City Song Summit. And we do it there, and it's a 50-minute thing. And I do my slideshow, and every 5 minutes or so, I rub my nose. It's our secret code. And this thing. So then what happened was, after we did it there, we were like, we got to take this on the road. We got to take this on the road. And then recently, I think it was really because of the passing of Bobby, I started really thinking in terms of like really honoring the legacy of this band, right? You know, the music will live on forever. There'll be more live performances by members of the Grateful Dead in some fashion. We don't know what. And so just like David Rawlings and Gillian Welch are doing right now with their acoustic thing of honoring the Grateful Dead, I thought, what can we do? What can me and Poltz do? And so I came up with this idea and presented it to Poltz. Let's do this thing called Workingman's Dead, and we're going to riff on our idea of this improvisation. But there's also going to be, I don't know, about 8 to 10 full Grateful Dead songs that Poltz is going to sing. And when Steve Poltz sings a Grateful Dead song, he owns that song. I saw Poltz at the Sweetwater Music Hall in Mill Valley here, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months ago. And he had just learned Wharf Rat driving in his car to the gig. And he came out and did Wharf Rat, and we were in tears. It was so incredible. And so I knew that that he could pull off. I mean, the first time I saw him do Box of Rain 10 years ago was unbelievable. And when he does Ripple out in the audience in the middle of a crowd, it is so heartwarming. And so he has this Grateful Dead songbook that we're expanding on. And during some of those songs, we're going to do like kind of a full multimedia slideshow. So you might be looking at, he might be doing Wharf Rat. We don't know what song it's going to be yet. It's improv, but there'll be a Jerry song, and there'll be a slideshow of photographs of Jerry from the beginning of his career until he dies. And there'll be the same thing for Bobby and the same thing for Phil. And then I'll do my slideshow, and he has no idea what I'm going to do. I've got 30 to 40 different stories pegged, and we're probably going to do 7 of them in a night. And he has no idea what they are. Maybe there'll be 10. I don't know. And he just has to think on his feet, like he said, without a net. And he has to write a song on the spot about what I just talked about. And it will most likely be mind-blowing, because I've seen him do this not just with me, but with other people. I've seen people hand him a note on stage at a festival. Hey, it's my brother's birthday, and he works at the radio station in town, and he's this years old, and he grew up in this state, and he loves the band, the Flaming Lips. And then Poltz writes a song on the spot.
You know, I was at a festival recently, and there's always, you know, the characters at every festival who do odd sorts of things. I think actually this was on Fish Lot. There's a gentleman with a typewriter who will write a poem on the spot. And I've had the good fortune of seeing him a few times. And every time I see him, I ask for a poem and give a donation, because I think what he does is absolutely incredible. And like you were saying, you know, his style of delivery, I mean, the last one he wrote for me genuinely brought me to tears. I mean, it was really magnificent what he did. You titled it Workingman's Dead, though, and I had to ask, why this particular album?
We didn't name it after an album.
So where did...
We are working men, and we're playing the songs of the dead.
Fair play. Now, are there
An
specific
album called
songs?
Workingman's Dead? I thought I made that up. Oh my God.
You know what? I am so sorry. This record has your name on it. I see it in the camera now. I didn't even realize it. I mean, those knuckleheads, they even printed the back upside down. Why would they do that? That being said, though, were there any specific songs from this album that you wrote that you felt were good for this style of reinterpretation?
We didn't write those songs. We just are going to reinterpret those songs. We're working on the set list now, so we're not going to reveal anything because it's all improv, right? This is without a net. There's a Grateful Dead record without a net, right? We are, that's right. So here's our philosophy. And Poltz and I, we got out the amethyst crystal right here, and we held it against our foreheads, right? And we basically said, these are the songs that we're going to play that are in the set list, and we don't know what we were going to play in the moment, right? So we're just going to go out there and we're going to wing it, right? There'll be a set number of songs, and there could be a song by another artist. There could be a Steve Poltz original. We don't know. That's the beauty of this. So like, a lot, and this is true. This is me not joking around. I truly base my photography career on the no risk, no reward mentality, which is exactly what the Grateful Dead base their career on when they go out and play. No risk, no reward, right? And sometimes that the Grateful Dead would take risks musically. Steve Poltz would take risks musically, and it would fail. But when it worked, the reward was mind-boggling, right? And so if I'm shooting an artist as a photographer, like I'm like, okay, that artist is a boring folk artist like Steve Poltz who's just standing at his microphone and not moving. So now I'm going to try and do multiple exposures or zoom in and out with a long exposure or try something weird or change the color balance, because Steve Poltz is so boring on stage, I've got to make him interesting. So I'm going to take some risks and hopefully there'll be a great reward that comes out of it, right? That's how I think about this. And I think that's how Poltz is thinking about this. And when we put the amethyst crystal to our head, we basically said no risk, no reward. Let's see what happens.
It's kind of like how Mikey Hauser just had a volume pedal and it's all he needed. Steve, how about you? I'm curious. Walk us through the show. What's it going to be like? What's it going to feel like going through this experience? Like from the musician's perspective and not necessarily the story. Like, how do you go through this process of improv? As a stand-up comedian, I only know how to do it with jokes. How do you do it with melodies and with songs? What are some of the tricks you've learned as a performer?
I just like to get into a Zen state. And when I'm on stage, that's when I feel most comfortable. And it all started years ago. I came in one day after surfing in Windansea in San Diego. I lived right at Windansea Beach, which is a really cool surf break. And I would go up the road to Little Point, and I'm goofy foot, so my right foot's forward, so I like a wave that goes left. I came in out of the water, and this guy had a plate of brownies, and I was starving. And I ate 3 of the brownies, and I thought I went insane. I didn't know they were pot brownies. And he said, "Where did those brownies go?" I said, "I ate them. I was hungry." And he said, "Oh my God, you're only supposed to eat a quarter." And I started crying, and I was begging to be taken to the hospital. I thought I'd gone insane. And before they took me to the hospital, somebody said, "Give him a guitar." And I put on a 2-hour show of all improv. And it opened up like a sliding glass door in the left side of my brain. And I realized I opened up that sliding glass door and I took a step out and jumped into a cloud and the cloud was like a cotton ball and it gently delivered me to the ground. And I realized I wasn't using all of my brain. So when I sit there and I hear Jay, I feel completely not cocky that it's going to be good. Not at all. I feel I'm filled with Zen and wonder, and I'm soaking in what he says because, number one, I love Jay so much. I like hearing his stories, and I know somehow my mind is going to filter it all down, and it's going to come out in a song, whatever my fingers lead me. And so I just have to know that I'm going to be on a journey, and it's going to be a path. And It's going to be improv and it's going to be super fun. And also, as an added bonus, he might say, "Hey, play Addicts of My Life." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is such a hard song to sing alone. Can I pull it off? Did I work on it good enough? Can I own that song? And will there be slides during Addicts of My Life?" I mean, that could be amazing. And so there's going to be a lot of wonder there. There's going to be tears and there's going to be a sense of community. And that's what this world needs, a sense of community, people in a circle, sharing the love, passing this on. And that's what Robert Hunter would want. And that's what Jerry would want. That's what Bobby would want. That's what Phil would want. And on and on and on. And we're just carrying that tradition.
When I spoke to, or rather when I interviewed Susanna Millman, she mentioned that, if Jerry could have played at dingy jazz and blues cafes forever, he would have been happy. And I remember the first time I went into Garcia's, I immediately pulled out my phone and texted Susanna and said, this is exactly where he would have played. And I got to ask, what drew you to Garcia's specifically for this event? Outside of the obvious, why Garcia's Chicago?
Well, well, you, of course, first of all. But we're big in Chicago. Typically we play Soldier Field, stadiums. We're like stadium level, but we wanted to do an underplay. And Garcia's state of the art with video screens, which we need because of the slideshow. And we wanted it to be intimate, like Jerry playing in the small blues club. And so, Pete Shapiro is a dear friend and a hero of mine. And I've been hearing about Garcia's in Chicago for years now because it was being built and then it got held up with the pandemic and kind of came back. And, we want people to be on tour. We want people to fly from all over the world. And Chicago is right in the middle of the country, so to speak. Right. And, and mostly they have good technology there with great screens and it's the right size room. So we just thought, and it's called Garcia's and we're doing the songs of the Grateful Dead. And going back to what Steve said also, which was, carrying on this legacy, that was something that Bob Weir talked about at the end of his life, which was this music kind of going on for 300 years. And it's going to happen through all sorts of different ways. Everybody that's ever touched that music, that's a musician, that has been inspired by that music, that's played that music. A lot of people know of Gillian Welch and Dave Rawlings as these incredible Nashville Americana singers, but Gillian was a deadhead in UC Santa Cruz when she went to college down here. So for her and David to play this Reckoning thing that they just did, I just saw it a couple of weeks ago, was phenomenal. It's just one other thread and more people, like Lee Ronaldo from Sonic Youth is a huge deadhead. Like it wouldn't surprise me to see Lee do something like this. Right. And the other thing that I want to say is that, a number of years ago, I saw Springsteen on Broadway and, he does this multimedia storytelling thing, songs. And it really touched me and really blew my mind. And ever since I saw that, I've sort of had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do something like that, but I don't have the talent to be on stage with a guitar and sing. I'm not a musician, right? But I know a lot of musicians. And I found when I stumbled upon Steve Poltz, it didn't occur to me, but when we did that thing at the Golden Road Festival in Arizona a few years ago, it really touched me. And it was a spontaneous idea. He was there, I was there, and I'm like, hey, something about Mary, right? And we surprised everybody. Nobody knew we were going to do it. Even the promoter didn't know we were going to do it. We just did it. And Steve hid behind like a partition in the room where we did this. Nobody even knew he was there. And then when it was time for the first song, like I cued him. He knew what I was going to say. Like there was some word that was like a cue, and he walked out down the center aisle, strumming his guitar and already singing his first song. And people were just like, what is going on? And we had no idea. We didn't rehearse anything. We just had an idea, a little tiny seed. And that's what this Workingman's Dead thing is. And so, like I said, we are going to do it at High Sierra, a shorter version of it. I think at Garcia's, it's going to be over 2 hours, right? It's going to be like probably close to 2.5 hour show. I mean, if Steve has to pee, he has to do it while I'm doing my slideshow, and then he won't even know what I'm talking about, and he's going to have to make up a story about not seeing my slideshow. All improv. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's how we're going to keep it. Like, he doesn't know what stories I'm going to tell, right? And then, we're gonna have a list of songs, and I don't even know what songs he's going to play. And I'm going to have slideshows that go along. Like, we are going to have a Jerry slideshow, a Bob slideshow, a Phil slideshow, and a fourth multimedia thing that I'm not going to talk about because I want it to be a surprise. And we don't know what songs they're going to go in, and he's going to surprise me, and I've got to make that work.
I've only done it solo. The pick list is how I did stand-up comedy, but I love that you said Broadway, because the thing that Broadway and Garcia's have in common is Meyer sound. And, Meyer's got a sound system in there. And let me tell y'all, it sounds fantastic. Steve, how do you feel coming to Garcia's? Have you been there before?
No, I have never been there. When I've played Chicago, I've played, all the other places you could say. And I really have. The Metro, Martyrs, Shuvas, Space in Evanston, the Evanston Folk Festival. I've played everywhere, but I've not played Garcia's. So I just had faith in Jay, when he told me about it. And so that's going to make it more exciting. I like to go in not knowing anything. I love spontaneity. I like to not know what's going to happen. It's my favorite thing. So I don't want to know what he's going to talk about. And Bob Weir, my friend, I'm really good friends with a guy named Tim Flannery, and he played second base for the Padres. Great baseball player. And then he was the third base coach with Bruce Bochy when they were at San Francisco and won 3 World Series. So Flannery used to sing with Bob Weir sometimes. He would come up, Bobby would call him up. And Flannery tells this story because Flannery's a musician. And Flannery, being a third base coach, would over prepare for everything because you need to know, okay, when this pitcher comes up, is he throwing low and outside? And is it going to cost this batter, who's a left-hander, to hit it to left field? So he's got to do the scouting reports, know everything. I mean, you've got to be on Adderall because every pitch is like you're really watching it. And so Tim would over-rehearse everything, what he was going to do with Bob. And he said Bob Weir, he would try to do it a couple times with Bob Weir, and Bob would get mad at him finally, and he would go, "Come on, Tim. Don't take the sport out of it." And so we laugh about that so much. And I love that quote. So I don't want to take the sport out of it.
Right. And I love Flannery too. He's a dear friend of mine as well. And through, music and the Grateful Dead and all this great stuff. I always say that I learned everything I know about photography from my Little League coach when I was 10 years old. And I'll save that story for another time because it's actually a true story. But speaking of Flannery, Poltz and I hope to take this on the road a little bit, right? Poltz has a robust solo career. He's out on the road all the time. I'm pretty sure that we have bad internet with him because he's like in Nova Scotia right now, or Newfoundland.
We're uploading in 1080p.
Remote part of Canada at the moment, where they really don't have internet because they haven't invented it yet up there. So he's relying on internet on a collar of a dog outside the hotel room. Which is why he's a little bit fuzzy in this. But the other thing that we plan on doing is having guests come with us. So when we play San Diego, Flannery might jump up on stage with us. So when we do High Sierra, right? So like I'm also like the great connector between people. Like my dear friend Lebo, who plays in a band called ALO, right? So Lebo, I introduced him to Pigeons playing ping pong, and now they're good friends and they've jammed together a bunch. Lebo just sat in with Eggy here in San Francisco. Eggy and Lebo are both going to be at High Sierra when we do our thing on Sunday. And I get to invite people to sit in with me finally, right? So I've already invited Lebo and Jake from Eggy. And so we've already got guests planned for High Sierra. But, we don't know about Chicago right now. We don't have a guest, but somebody might pop up who's like, Bon Jovi might be playing at some arena there. He might come down now. We don't know. Like, anything can happen. It's all no risk, no reward. So, and again, High Sierra is just sort of a test run. We're going into it like with open minds and open hearts, and we're just going to see what happens. And that's just 2 weeks before Garcia's. So that'll give us a chance to really fail miserably in front of like a bunch of stoned hippies on a Sunday afternoon at High Sierra. But, we're hoping that by Sunday, everybody is going to be like so exhausted from all the drugs they've taken all weekend at High Sierra, all the psychedelics they've taken, that they're going to be really psyched to come indoors in the air conditioning for I think it's at 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon on Sunday, and sit inside in the air conditioning. They're going to be like, I'm going to go take a nap, and not realize what's going to happen. And they're going to be like, oh my God. And the word of mouth is going to be so huge that promoters are going to be Live Nation and AEG and Another Planet, and all the big promoters are going to come out of the woodwork, and David Weingarten and Boulder and Don Strasberg and all the big famous rock promoters are going to offer us millions of dollars to take this on the road. And so that's all going to come from a stony Sunday afternoon at High Sierra and a gig at Garcia's. And who knows what's going to happen? Anything can happen. Anything. We do not know. And that's how we're going into this.
I love it. And for my part, having been a performer in Chicago for about 20 years, I think that Garcia's is the best new venue that we've had in my lifetime. In my career in the industry, I have not seen a new venue open with such consistent sound, service, lineups, just really quality from top to bottom. All of the staff are wonderful. It's a beautiful space. They really designed it wonderfully. And it's really the perfect setting for everything that you've been describing for this type of experience. Like, I cannot think of a venue, and Steve, you've played them all. I can't think of a better venue in Chicago to suit this experience. I think that it's really going to be something magical. And just a reminder for folks, it is July 15th, and we will be putting the link for tickets in the description of this episode. So you can check down below for the link to tickets, get them before they sell out, because they will sell out quick. And after Garcia's, do you guys have any plans to take this further down the road?
We're big there too. Yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah. Yeah, we're hoping to do this in more. I mean, in a perfect world for me, I would like to do this 6 to 10 times a year with Poltz, something like that. 6 shows a year, do 3 shows on the East Coast one year, 3 shows on the West Coast the next year, or the end of the, that kind of thing. Just like a couple of weekends. I'm going to tell a funny story though. Not a funny story, just a great story. I was in Tokyo last week. And there's a band there called the Warlocks of Tokyo. They're a Grateful Dead cover band. Okay.
Get at it.
And my neighbor who lives on my block here lived in Tokyo for like 8 years. I became friends with them, and they were supposed to play at the Skull and Roses Festival a few years ago, but they couldn't get their visas, and they were going to come to San Francisco and stay with my neighbor Brian and come over to my house, and they were excited to meet me. And so when I told my neighbor Brian I was going to Tokyo, he moved back about 1.5 years ago. He said, "Oh, let me connect you with Ken from Warlocks of Tokyo. Maybe they have a show." And so I emailed Ken, and Ken said, "Well, we have no Warlocks of Tokyo, but I'll put together a show for you in the style of the Jerry Garcia band." So he put together a band at this little club called Lone, Lown, Lone. And it was a Jerry Garcia band show. And they played The Harder They Come and When I Paint My Masterpiece.
Wow.
They played Sugary, and they sing it all in Japanese. Okay. and Ken, okay. And also the name of the band that he put together for this thing, and he put this together for me because I was coming. The name of the band was Ken and Friends, like Phil and Friends, right? I'm like an O'Teal and Friends. It's Ken and Friends. So we get to this bar, and I bring a bunch of Grateful Dead postcards and giving them to everybody in the audience. And the venue only holds 30 people. It was sold out, right? And so we're talking to all the people, and nobody speaks really good English, even though some of them had lived in America for decades, and we're communicating. I'm talking to this guy who's wearing a Phil and Friends shirt, and I'm talking to him, and all of a sudden Ken says to everybody, "Okay, let's play." And the guy I'm talking to is 70 years old, gets up, goes on stage, and he's the bass player in the band. He's Japanese Phil Lesh. Okay. Right. And so they start playing, and my neighbor Brian says that besides Ken, so when he was 15 years old, he had an epiphany that he needed to be the Japanese Jerry Garcia.
Wow.
Okay. And then he went about, his life's work has been to translate all of the Grateful Dead lyrics to Japanese. Okay. This is like taking the sacred scrolls and translating them. Like scholars spend an entire lifetime doing this. So he has the entire Grateful Dead songbook translated to Japanese. They did Sugary. It was unbelievable. We were crying. It was so good. They had a female singer. They had Japanese Donna, and they had Japanese Melvin Seals, who was white and Japanese. They had Japanese David Kemper, Japanese John Kahn. There was a guy sitting at the bar. He was 120 years old. And when he called the band up to start playing, he was the harmonica player, and he ripped it up. It was unbelievable. It was the greatest night of my life.
That is
when I see Steve Poltz.
That is outstanding. And it actually, episode 3 of this season is my friend Chen, who also translates Grateful Dead songs. And I actually sing Grateful Dead songs in another language as well, but that's another story for another time. And, I know we're running a little bit low on time here, according to my notes. And I was just wondering, before we leave off, my final thoughts always are, you mentioned, or we talked about Fare Thee Well earlier, and it was an extraordinarily impactful event for me. And Jay, one of the things that I appreciate the most about the book is something I say all the time: Mickey Hart's last 2 words, just be kind, and that's something that we try to convey with this show all the time. And I think it's incredibly kind what you all are doing with such beautiful music.
We're excited to do this. Let me talk about Fare Thee Well just for a second. We all went into GD50, and GD50 was promoted by Pete Shapiro, who of course does Garcia's. And Pete called me up in December the year before and said, he goes, Jay, guess what, man? I got the band back together, and guess who's playing lead guitar? Trey Anastasio, and you can't tell anybody, right? And then they announced it a month later, and the Grateful Dead community blows up, and nobody knew what to expect, right? We really didn't know what to expect. But the bottom line is that Fare Thee Well was the greatest Grateful Dead reunion that ever happened, right? When Jerry Garcia died, we all thought it was the end. But what we didn't realize at the time, and I now realize, and I'm pretty sure that I coined this phrase, is that when Jerry died, it was halftime. Okay. Because that was a 30 period, 65, 95. And now we went 95, 2026, essentially, with Bobby and Phil dying shortly before that. So we had 2 30-year periods. Everybody in the Grateful Dead, Mickey, Billy, Bobby, Phil, had 30-year careers, solo careers, post Jerry Garcia, robust solo careers, stadiums, arenas, theaters, clubs, everything. But when we got to Fare Thee Well, there were a lot of people when Jerry died that went off and did crazy things, like got jobs and had families and did really insane things like that, right? And then, and some of them didn't get to see a lot of Grateful Dead. If you weren't in the West Coast or the East Coast or maybe Chicago or a couple different places, you probably didn't see a lot of Grateful Dead. We saw a lot here. We had 10 years of Terrapin Crossroads with Phil Lesh and 10 years of Sweetwater with Bob Weir. I mean, these are neighborhood nightclubs with 300 people where they're reinventing and reinterpreting the Grateful Dead songbook with incredible musicians night after night. We were so lucky to have Further and Dead and Company and Billy and Mickey doing the Rhythm Devils and Bill Kreutzmann's,
Seven Walkers
and all of the things that these guys did were incredible. Phil and Friends, so much great Grateful Dead music in that 30-year period. And when we got to Soldier Field, you could feel that community, you could feel that family reunion. It was there's the Fare Thee Well sticker. It was so beautiful to see that. And of course, what blossomed out of that was Dead and Company. And really the Grateful Dead, because of Fare Thee Well, and then Dead and Company moving on, and Phil and Friends doing during all those years, and what Pete Shapiro did at the Capitol Theater with Phil for his annual runs for his birthday and Halloween, the Grateful Dead became bigger than they ever had been before. And the community became stronger. And like Steve said earlier, that's what Workingman's Dead is about, right? We're just one little sliver of bringing that community together that we can commune together with this music and these stories. And because of what I do and what I've done over the years, we have the photos and the stories to go with it, right? And so now we're putting these songs to the visuals in a different way than a documentary film. But it is a documentary because there's stories, and it is a film because there's visuals, and it is a multimedia experience because we have video monitors and we're in a slideshow. We're like, no
So
risk.
we act.
I have no idea what is going to happen, but I think it's going to be really something cool. And I think that the Deadheads, and even if you're not a Deadhead, I think you're going to walk away from this with an appreciation for the history of this band, the music of this band. Like I said, when Steve Poltz sings a Grateful Dead song, he owns it. And he said that to me. I said, can you learn these 10 songs? And I gave him this list, and he goes, these are some hard songs. Some of these, like, well, I won't mention what names of them because I want it to be a surprise. But he's like, when I do a Grateful Dead song, I need to own it. I need to really feel it. I can't just phone it in. And that's not who Poltz is. And I know that. That's why we chose each other. That's why the universe collided and exploded, and this purple amethyst crystal was formed so that me and Poltz could come together to do Workingman's Dead at Garcia's on July 15th, 2026, just to see what happens, right? The universe has a way of speaking. I totally believe in magic. I totally believe I'm a hippie through and through. I've taken LSD. I know all the things about it, right? I've experienced it all. And all the psychedelic energy of the universe has now brought me and Steve Poltz together. And we are going to make magic, we hope. No risk, no reward. We'll find out when we get there.
I love it. Acting without a net while weaving the tapestry at the same time. It's really kind of a beautiful thing. And Steve, being from your noisy neighbor to the downstairs, I'm curious, what do you hope to get from Garcia's to bring to Garcia's? I know. Absolutely. And folks, let us remind you, the music never stops. We'll see you next Wednesday. This has been an episode of Secondhand Talent, and be at Garcia's on July 15th. Have a good week.
Thanks, Steiner.
See you next time.